Due to Earth's extreme weather conditions in 2019, a special system of satellites was invented to control the climate. Years after its smooth implementation, alarming weather occurrences threatened the human population, and it's up to two estranged brothers to uncover the secrets and save the world. Jake Lawson, the chief operations coordinator of a system of satellites called Dutch Boy, attends a Senate hearing regarding its transfer of authority to an international oversight committee 3 years from now. Senator Cross implies his disagreement since they built the satellite. Jake stresses that the senator has no direct participation in building Dutch Boy, but he resembles a plumber in the space station. Cross responds by enumerating Jake's acts of insubordination. Max, Jake's younger brother and a White House official, sends him a message to stop his cheekiness. Jake continues to bicker with Cross regardless of Max's consistent warning. Finally, the senator mentions how the chief allowed Dutch Boy's operations online without the authorities' consent. Jake asserts that this poses no harm to the project and helps in saving millions of people around the world. Regardless of the outcome, Cross attests that if he continuously disobeys, he'll be taken off the project. The brothers stare at each other and Jake finally agrees, but the senator adds that he needs to reduce his staff, as he'll send people to replace them. Upon hearing this, Jake insults the senator's hidden agenda for wanting to take the spotlight. As Jake discredits the senator, Max gives up on him and Cross adjourns the hearing. Soon after, the siblings meet and Jake tells Max to fix things like always. However, the younger Lawson claims it's different this time since he's now the officer in charge of Dutch Boy. Jake sincerely congratulates him, but seeing his brother's grave expression, he realizes something's wrong and Max finally fires him from work. 3 years later, the military arrives at a desert village in Afghanistan and discovers that everything is frozen. In the White House, Max greets Sarah, one of the president's bodyguards. He praises her beauty and the agent reminds him of the rules they need to follow. Max attends the meeting regarding Afghanistan where the president and other politicians bicker back and forth about keeping it a secret, shutting the satellites down, and its effect on the upcoming elections. Max chimes in, reiterating that people perished in the incident, so they must focus on solving it. President Palma solicits his thoughts and he suggests sending a team of qualified scientists to the space station. The president allows him to send only one person to keep it discreet. After the meeting, DECOM's Secretary of State recommends Jake to do the job. Despite Max's refusal, the secretary insists that his judgment should be trusted since he's the one who first trusted his capabilities. In the space station, the Afghan satellite is retrieved for inspection. A personnel named Mahmoud copies the information from its drive. Then he hides the holoframe, a multifunctional data device, in a bunch of books and keeps it in a locker. Mahmoud hurriedly leaves, but the doors suddenly close, trapping him in an airlock that gets ejected to outer space. Meanwhile, Max arrives at his brother's house in Florida and sees Hannah, his niece, so they briefly catch up. Jake pretends to see a stranger, and as Hannah gives them space, Max is blamed for his brother's pathetic life. To fulfill his mission, Max announces that Dutch Boy has a problem, noting the tragedy in Afghanistan and the space station. Jake refuses to help, but Max triggers his pride to bait him. In Hong Kong, Cheng, Max's friend, conducts a personal investigation concerning the Afghan incident. He calls the officer-in-chief, but gets diverted to voicemail. Cheng heads out to buy groceries amidst a sweltering evening. When he's about to return, the ground explodes and swirls of flames follow while the roads crumble. The scientist drives away in his car, racing against the blasts. Upon reaching a safe distance, the temperature rapidly drops. He heads out and stares at the devastated city, still wrapped in flames. In Florida, Jake sends Hannah home to her mom in Atlanta without telling her the truth. However, the clever girl already knows and angrily bids goodbye to her dad. As she walks away, the teenager declares she wants him to return safely. The two hug each other and bid goodbye once more. Afterward, Jake arrives at Kennedy Space Center and excitedly rides the rocket to reach the space station. He lands safely and Fassbinder, the current commander, greets him. Jake critiques details of Dutch Boy that aren't up to his standards and insults the commander's incompetence, pushing Fassbinder to tell her position. She meaningfully apologizes if things aren't as he expected since one of her men passed away last week. She escorts him to a team who'll work alongside him. As soon as they enter the meeting room, Taylor openly declares his disagreement with being supervised by an American. Jake ignores him and familiarizes himself with Adisa, a structural engineer, Taylor, an expert programmer, Hernandez, the robotics expert, and Dassett, the head of security. Fassbinder then introduces Jake, who prompts everyone to begin the investigation. At Max's residence, the chief convinces Sarah to marry him, but the agent declines due to the rules. She promises to marry him soon, but the president comes first for now. Their sweet time is interrupted when Cheng calls Max. The researcher expresses his doubts regarding Hong Kong's tragedy as a gas pipe leak because until now, his access to Dutch Boy is blocked. Max checks his holoframe and discovers that even his access is denied. Cheng adds that the only ones who can block their access are from the White House. If this access interruption is intentional and Dutch Boy has an issue, it can lead to a geostorm, the simultaneous catastrophic weather events rising all over the world. Cheng resumes his investigation, but the power shuts down. Armed men barge into the office, but the researcher isn't around as he silently hides, so they can only confiscate his laptop. At the space station, Jake and the team scan more than 1,000 satellites to identify the cause of freezing. On the other hand, Max goes to Dana, a programmer friend from the White House, to check his holoframe. So she scans the device and discovers that the access block is intentional. Dana says that she wants to join the fun, but Max dismisses her. Then he rushes to contact his brother. Jake and Fassbinder speak with the White House representative, and they're greeted by Decom, who reminds Jake they can't fail. Then he informs him that Max is his direct boss. The brothers are left alone and Jake starts an argument, but Max narrates his discoveries regarding the Hong Kong satellite. Jake tells him that the only way to see the system logs is by looking at the satellite in the space station. Max grants permission, angering Jake as he says he won't need his brother's authorization. Max furiously enumerates Jake's misadventures since their parents' passing, leaving him to clean up after his mess, so he threatens him to obey or he'll be kicked out. Soon, Jake's team extracts the Hong Kong satellite, but the robotic arm holding it goes out of control, so everyone tries to flee as the satellite gets thrown around. Jake pushes Fassbinder away just in time before she gets crushed by the machine. Before they know it, the satellite is destroyed. Later, the team checks if they can retrieve the drives, but Taylor states that everything is burned. Dosset interjects, saying that while reviewing the footage of Mahmoud's incident, he discovered that each panel in the airlock contains a drive and one is stuck in the communication tower. Meanwhile, Cheng calls Max to tell him he solved the mystery and sets a meeting where they used to hang out. In the space station, Fassbinder and Jake set out to the communication tower to retrieve the panel. On their way back, Jake's spacesuit suddenly becomes uncontrollable. Fassbinder chases Jake while the man gets dragged in all directions while still holding the panel. The commander tells him to eject the pack, and he rolls away, grabbing a cable to stop himself from being lost in outer space forever. Moments later, Jake shows Fassbinder the retrieved drive. When the team arrives, Taylor expresses disappointment that they lost the drive codes. Jake keeps the truth from the team, and shortly after, Fassbinder asks him why, so Jake responds that the culprit doesn't want them to see the drive's content. The two finally open the drive and discover that the airlock was deliberately opened while the system logs are erased, just like the purposely tampered Hong Kong satellite. When Jake checks the system archives that only a few people know of, his access is blocked. Meanwhile, Max waits anxiously for his friend, and Sarah reminds her boyfriend to calm down. They see Cheng approaching them, but just as he's about to cross the road, a man pushes him and a car hits him. Max rushes to his friend, and Sarah calls 911 while noticing that the culprit rides the same car that hit Cheng, so she chases it but misses. Concurrently, Cheng utters Zeus before passing away. Afterward, Max impatiently asks his brother why he's summoned urgently. Jake says he wants to apologize, agitating the younger Lawson since he left Cheng for this. When Max is about to leave, Jake mentions their unspoken code of not turning their backs on each other. Jake reminisces about their childhood when their father brought them to fish, and the meeting ends with them staring at each other. Afterward, Max goes to Dana to decode Jake's story. She cracks it, and the real message unveils, saying that Jake has proof of sabotage from the White House, so Max shouldn't trust anyone. The friends become bewildered, but Dana decides to participate. Max asks her to research Project Zeus, and the programmer finds the files, but it can only be opened by credentials from the White House. Hours later, Sarah opens the door of their house when she hears thumps from the kitchen. She prepares her gun and points it at the shocked intruder, Dana. Max calms Sarah down, but the girlfriend insists on an explanation. He informs her that Dana is helping her. Then, the man requests his partner to break into the White House server so that the programmer can open Project Zeus. After arguing and Dana's unsolicited comments, Sarah agrees to help. Meanwhile, Jake proudly leads Fassbinder to the backup server room he built as a secret place to watch the footage, but it's now a stockroom. Fassbinder comments that he built the place, but she lives here, so she opens another door leading to the real backup server room. They discover that Mahmoud managed to get information from the Afghan satellite and saved it in his holoframe before rushing to his lockers. The two hurriedly open the lockers, but it's empty. Dusset suddenly points a gun at them, asking what they're doing. Jake concludes that the culprit wants to end his life and stage Mahmoud's death as an accident, but he adds that he doesn't think Dusset is the culprit. Upon hearing this, Dusset tells them that he witnessed where Mahmoud kept his stuff before the accident, and is waiting for whoever will come looking for it to catch the culprit. Finally, they see the holoframe and open it in the backup server room. The commanders conclude that the virus was implanted in the Afghan satellite. Concurrently, Dana shows the couple Project Zeus's content, thousands of storm simulations. Max claims that if this happens, a geostorm will occur. Upon checking the Afghan and Hong Kong satellites, they concluded that someone had weaponized Dutch Boy. Max urgently speaks with his brother to share his findings, while Dana secures their privacy. Jake tells him that the enemies are using a virus to control Dutch Boy, and the only way to stop this is to reboot the whole system. However, Jake needs kill codes that only the president can access. Dana suggests going to Palma, and Max states he needs more concrete evidence. Jake stops them as he stresses that the culprit has accessed secret information only the president knows about, so it's possible he's behind it. Max argues, but his brother's bases are strong. As the president prepares to board a plane to attend the national conference in Orlando, Sarah spots Max and corners him. He informs her that Jake needs the codes that only President Palma has in his holoframe, so they plan to steal it. In the space station, the crew face chaos due to over 200 satellites malfunctioning while their access is blocked. Seconds later, a crew announces the loss of complete control of the Tokyo satellite. In Tokyo, a severe hailstorm hits the city, immediately causing massive damage and casualties. Meanwhile, President Palma greets Max and comments he's unaware that the official will join him on the flight. Max makes an excuse and boards the plane with Decom and the others. Simultaneously, severe storms occur in various parts of the world. In Brazil, the sea suddenly freezes and the people run for their lives. Anything that's caught in the cool breeze instantly becomes frozen. Jake comes up with a solution to send reinforcement satellites so that they can collide with the infected satellites. Everyone follows his command and they try to complete the task. In Rio, most people have become casualties and a woman dashes off while frozen birds fall. Unfortunately, a plane crashes behind her and she's at a dead end. Then the reinforcement satellite for Brazil collides with the infected one and the storm ceases. Jake and the people at the space station celebrate as they resume sending their reinforcements. However, their happiness is short-lived as the countdown to a geostorm activates, and the timer shows only an hour and a half until it hits. In Orlando, Max notices the news about Rio and checks his holoframe, seeing the countdown to a geostorm. Suddenly, Decom corners Max to ask why the young official insists on coming with them. Max informs him of a calamity and he needs the president's kill codes to shut down Dutch Boy. He adds that Palma is behind the sinister plan and Decom asks for evidence, so Max discloses that he has Project Zeus's files. The secretary explains that they can't steal the kill codes because it's through biometrics, so they must persuade Palma instead. The warning alarm for self-destruction mode blares in the space station. Unfortunately, all personnel's access is blocked, and Dusset comments in disbelief about Jake's idea of a self-destruct mode. Fassbinder frantically looks for Taylor since he's the only one who can override the commands. An explosion occurs, so Jake orders everyone to evacuate and looks for Taylor. Jake sees Taylor and attacks him while narrating the programmer's refusal to help. Taylor is overpowered, so he secretly grabs the gun he hid and points it at Jake. Jake tries to persuade him to stop, but Taylor's primary concerns are money and the fascination of ending the world. Jake speedily throws a counterattack which catches Taylor off guard. The two brawl while holding the gun, and the trigger is pulled, shooting a window. Seeing the glass cracking, Jake leaves the room, locking Taylor in, who gets engulfed in outer space due to the pressure. In Orlando, Decom accompanies Max to the president's quarters and hands him the room's key. The secretary asks the official what other information Cheng told him, and Max finally realizes he's an enemy. In the nick of time, he dodges Decom's bullet and escapes. Sarah notices her boyfriend frantically signaling to her. Decom spots Max, so he commands his chief guard, who took Cheng's life, not to let Palma leave the building. Meanwhile, Max tells Sarah that the culprit is Decom. He adds that the next storm is heading to Orlando and concludes that if Palma passes away, the next in line for president is Decom. Aside from that, the kill code is activated through biometrics, so if Palma's gone, Dutch Boy is unstoppable. Sarah instructs Jake to get them a car while she takes the president. She heads to the stage and pretends there's a gunman, so Palma is immediately escorted out, which Sarah grabs as a chance to capture him. She drags him to the parking area and disappointedly comments on Max's choice of vehicle since he only got them a self-driving cab. Max requests Palma to enter and promises to explain. but Decom's men shoot at them as they drive off. The unfazed Sarah runs them over and manages to escape the stadium. Meanwhile, Fassbinder leads her crew to evacuate while the space station crumbles, and less than an hour remains until the geostorm. Simultaneously, Decom commands his men to capture Palma to prevent him from accessing the kill codes. On the other hand, Max has finished explaining Decom's plans, especially wiping out everyone in the line of succession to the presidency. Then, the whole stadium is hit by lightning, causing a massive explosion. This convinces the president, and they see the destruction caused by the storm. Palma instructs Sarah to take cover under the bridge, and simultaneously, India faces massive hurricanes while a laser hits Russia, melting everything in the area. Consequently, Palma warns Max that he has to be sure it's Decom's schemes, so the younger official enumerates everything he knows, backed up by Sarah, whom he calls Honey, disclosing the relationship. Sarah drives skillfully while evading the lightning and bullets from their pursuers. Max informs her that they'd be out of the bridge soon, and the agent drifts the car as it turns facing the enemy vehicle. Now in a close distance, she shoots at the pursuers while driving backward, ending the driver's life before drifting forward. The men in the car frantically hold onto their seats, and Palma tells Max to marry Sarah. Meanwhile, Decom's chief guard drives their car. Suddenly, his car is hit by Sarah's vehicle and thrown out from the bridge. His car is hit by lightning, causing an explosion and ending his life. Concurrently, Hannah watches the news coverage about Orlando and the space station. Her mom fails to connect with her dad, so she asks Hannah if she knows his whereabouts, and the frightened teenager responds that her father is in the space station. Meanwhile, the crew boards the final shuttle for evacuation, and Jake declares he'll stay behind to reboot Dutch Boy, believing that Max can activate the kill codes. Fassbinder volunteers to stay instead, but Jake points out he's the only one Max trusts. He requests her holoframe and the commander gives it. Then he hurriedly returns to the station. On the outskirts of Orlando, Decom tracks where the president is and stops by the road to intercept his vehicle. While his man prepares missile launchers to complete their mission, the secretary anticipates claiming the presidency. Moments later, the cab approaches Decom's location and his man blasts it off. Decom approaches the blazing vehicle with his gun to ensure Palma's demise, but as he does, Sarah has him at gunpoint. Palma confronts Decom and the special forces arrest him. The secretary insists on justifying his actions while trying to push Palma to a corner because Dutch Boy is in his command. He claims that he's similar to a god due to Dutch Boy, so Max steps in and punches him on behalf of Jake. Meanwhile, in the United Arab Emirates, a tsunami hits the city, wiping out its grandeur. Finally, Palma, Sarah, and Max arrive at Kennedy Space Center to activate the kill codes. With less than 10 minutes left, the head scientist tells them that the crew evacuated, but Jake chose to stay to reboot Dutch Boy. The president escorts Max to the virtual conference room, where Jake anxiously awaits. The younger Lawson informs his brother that Decom was behind it all. The president activates the kill codes and Jake asks about Hannah, who becomes reassured that Atlanta wasn't hit. Palma informs Max that the codes take a minute to upload and thanks Jake for his sacrifice before leaving the brothers alone. Max finally realizes that the kill codes can only stop the geostorm, not the station's self-destruct mode. He blames himself for his brother's tragic fate, but Jake dismisses the thought and asks for forgiveness. He also entrusts Hannah to Max, and the computer notifies the kill code upload. They bid goodbye, and Jake hurries to the mainframe with less than 6 minutes left amidst the crumbling space station. With one big explosion, the station's gravity is gone, while on Earth, Hannah anxiously watches the live broadcast, hopeful that her father will return. Meanwhile, Jake wears a spacesuit and floats toward the mainframe room. However, upon entering the passcode, his access is invalid. Fassbinder suddenly speaks, asking if he needs help. Jake feels relieved and she opens another door, repeating that she lives here. On Earth, the storms intensify and only less than a few minutes remain. Jake finally uploads the kill codes and Dutch Boy shuts down. He instructs Fassbinder to inform him once the last satellite cycle is down, since that's the only time he can pull the reboot lever to remove the virus. With 4 seconds remaining, it shuts down and Jake pulls the lever. Dutch Boy's system stops and the storms on Earth cease instantly. Everyone celebrates and Fassbinder confirms that all systems are running smoothly. She transfers the control back to NASA, but an explosion occurs in the space station. Max can only watch as the computer notifies them that the space station is at the final stage of self-destruction mode. Jake holds Fassbinder's hand as tears fall from her face as they accept their end. Suddenly, Jake spots an intact satellite and they propel themselves toward it. They enter the hatch before the final explosion. The live coverage of the space station ends after the blast and Max mourns his brother's loss. In Atlanta, Hannah cries in her mother's arms after the confirmation of the space station's destruction. However, the NASA chief notices something blinking on the monitor as the flares blink in a Mayday pattern. Jake and Fassbinder hope that someone has noticed their signal. They suddenly hear rumblings as the satellite shakes. Looking out the window, they see that a shuttle from the evacuation has grabbed their vessel and notices Hernandez grinning at them. Everyone celebrates the turn of events, while the weather on Earth returns to as normal as it possibly can, relieving the survivors. Afterward, the space crew lands safely at Kennedy Space Center. Jake hugs Fassbinder and Sarah introduces herself to him as Max's fiancée. He welcomes her to the family and President Palma expresses his gratitude. Jake apologizes for doubting him and Max points out his mistake, but this time they hug each other. 6 months later, the brothers and Hannah fish near Jake's residence. Max asks his brother when he'll return to space. He answers he'll be leaving in a week and stares at Hannah as he says he'll be back. His daughter smiles in reassurance and comments on how boring fishing is, which prompts the brothers to express the same. They pack and head home as Hannah narrates how they move forward by learning from their past, as united people who share the same future.
Subscribe to watch more videos like this, turn on notifications and leave a like to help the channel out. Thank you for watching.